Gregory and Lantine, District 25, which is most of the city of Twin Falls. Not all of it, but most of it. I'm here today to ask for your approval with a due pass for House Bill 111. It deals with elections. It was brought to me by our good Secretary of State, wanting to make sure that we take care of school safety, and I think it really is right on the nose. If you think about it, just a few days ago, we had active shooter scares all across the southern Idaho, and I just said, what would happen? Think about what would happen if we had kids in a school, had that kind of a thing. What happens to the election that day at that building? People would cause certain problems. What it does is the schools may have their adults there during that time, but they can't have their students there. It has the bill has a delayed effective date until clear to July of 2024, giving districts time to set their calendars so that they operate have an election in one of their buildings. Then they would have some time to get that calendar set. And to my understanding, and I'll have the Secretary of State correct me, but I believe that if you have multiple buildings in your district and only one is being used as a polling place, that's the only one that would not have students there. The others could go ahead and have normal class if that works. We used to do that once in a while, and most of you know I was a middle school principal. There were multiple times where the elementary was out and we were with either some sort of a training or maybe parent-teacher conferences, but we were still in session, so districts are used to being able to do this, and I think they could this gives them enough latitude to decide what works best for their district as far as having the election in their building, a building and the other building still in session, or everybody out, or everybody's in in-service, whatever works best for the district. Let's let them to decide how to make it work. Schools are an excellent place for elections because one, they're typically ADA qualified, or at least a building in the district is ADA and allows for voting. And so if I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Representative Lantine? Representative McCann?
I just have a real quick clarification, I guess. So most of the times that I've ever been in a election at a school, it's been like in the gym, a big space, which also is the cafeteria. So would it be, in your opinion then, if that's the only area, could they could just do box lunches, something to get the kids fed on that day in a different manner, so that shouldn't preclude schools from being open in other buildings? Is that your
I'm going to give my thoughts, but also I'm sorry, Chairman Rambo,
yeah.
Representative McCain.
You're good.
Give me a newbie. My estimation would be that no, if you're having an election in that building, but I will let Secretary of State give us his thoughts, if you would, on that particular question.
Secretary of State McGrain, even though you don't have a bow tie, you are very welcome to come forward. And
is there a rule that I didn't know about?
I don't know. I think there is, but apparently
Bow tie Friday.
bow tie. Oh, it's bow tie Friday, but nobody on the committee except for our. Oh wait, you're doing it. Do you have a bow tie? Look at her. All right, Shirley, I digress. And I'm not calling you Shirley. Okay, the floor, for the record information, and the floor is yours.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. For the record, my name is Phil McGrain. I'm the Secretary of State to the great state of Idaho. And it is truly a privilege to be in front of you this morning. I like to think you guys are more gentle than state affairs, where I normally reside. So it is a privilege, and nice to see some new faces. Madam Chair, would you prefer that I answer the specific question of Representative McCann, or do you want me to address the bill at large?
I think start with the question and then roll right into the rest.
Yep. All right, sounds great. Representative McCann, so this legislation would specifically limit all student instruction in schools across Idaho. It's just the in-person, so classes could still be held virtually if they chose, or as we've talked with many of our school partners, it's likely school calendars would be adjusted. Frequently, there are in-service or parent-teacher days very near Election Day. Usually the Thursday and Friday preceding a November election are very commonly used as in-service days. And In our conversations, I think there's hope to align the calendars to be as least disruptive as possible. I don't want to say this isn't disruptive to schools, but to minimize the disruption. The genesis of this bill is kind of twofold. As you all know, especially being in this committee, schools are often community centers throughout our state. And one of the key things about our schools is they are located based on residency. That also happens to be the same metrics that we use for polling locations. Often the places that we have the most difficult time finding a place to vote is in residential communities where you have huge neighborhoods or others. There just aren't facilities to facilitate voting, but there's often an elementary school with a gymnasium or a cafeteria that was mentioned, and it serves as an excellent place. And not surprisingly, the most common polling place throughout the state are schools. It really serves as an important part of our system. Many of our clerks and school districts have great relationships and partnerships trying to make this work. But as you also are acutely aware, student safety continues to be on the rise. Unfortunately, our country has had too many shootings at schools, and safety concerns just continue to be at the forefront for our educators. I know for Superintendent Critchfield, in my conversations with her, that is one of her priorities, making sure our students are safe. And what I have seen in my experience as a clerk is each election, that pressure and concern rises. A perfect example just here locally is the West Ada School District has taken steps to lock down their schools in terms of access to those buildings. They do that for every day except Election Day, in which we open up the school and we bring in thousands of people from the community. And it's that contrast that really has a rub. And every single election we hear from upset and frustrated parents or concerned teachers and others. And so I know both as administrators and as election officials, we've heard those calls, and it really is a concern. The other aspect of this, often when I hear from parents, will be, well, vote someplace else. Finding polling locations has become a huge challenge for our election officials. And to the point where I truly believe it is impacting turnout in our elections. Canyon County Clerk Chris Yamamoto, just to put it in comparison, in Ada County, while Ada County is larger, we have 181 polling locations. Canyon County this last election, I believe, had 28. And it was because they had a difficult time finding enough buildings to be able to use as polling locations. Specifically, and it was mentioned by Representative Lanting, polling places are unique in that, just like any other government building, they are required to meet all ADA standards. The challenge is, one of our other common sources of voting locations is churches. Churches are exempt from the ADA, except for the 12 hours in which we're using them. In that 12-hour window, they must meet every single standard in the ADA. And we have, both Ada and Canyon County have been audited by the Department of Justice for those standards. It's become a rising challenge. Schools really serve as our best possible source of polling locations. We've had, unfortunately, stories in some parts of our state where there's been over hour-long waits to vote. And personally, as secretary and someone who wants to make sure everyone has access to voting, we shouldn't have people having to wait, or shouldn't have people unable to find a parking space to even get in that line to wait. And unfortunately, I can report that we have had those concerns. I didn't anticipate bringing this before you, but in all sincerity, my concern is with the 2024 presidential election, where we always see the highest turnout coming up. I think this is really coming to a head, both the student safety concerns and the opportunity to have accessible polling locations. And so, as was referenced, this legislation has a delayed effective date to the 2024. That's to give school administrators the opportunity to adjust calendars. The language in here, I want to say we've worked very closely with the Idaho School Boards Association and Idaho School Administrators Association. I believe both of those organizations are neutral to it. As I mentioned, it doesn't come without its inconveniences. But we've worked very closely with them, Superintendent Critchfield, to make sure we are narrowing it to give as much flexibility to the districts. You'll notice one aspect of this is that it specifically limits it for the November and May election dates, and the March and August dates, it's by district, on whether, because the March and August dates are specifically limited to schools holding bond and levy elections, it would only be that school district that would be hosting a bond and levy election that would be impacted. So we presume no student instruction if that school district is going to be pursuing a bond or a levy. So we've tried really hard to work through all the kinks on this. If there is anything that arises, I think we will still have a future session if we need to make any adjustments. But I encourage your support because we all recognize how important student safety is. And I know each of you certainly appreciate how significant voting is in our state. With that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Before we have testimony, are there any questions for our presenters? Representative Price.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And either one of you could probably answer this. So you specified that only the schools that have elections are going to be closed. Is that clearly defined in this?
Mr. McGrane.
Madam Chair, Representative Price, that is actually, let me clarify, that's not the case. All schools, there will be no student instruction in all schools, even if it is in a polling location. It would be all schools throughout the state in those November and May dates. And I believe for the calendar purposes, I just think as the districts, it's harder to have some open and some trying to vary. So this was specifically all for the November and May dates. It would be at every school. For the March and August dates, it would be limited to that district. It would still be district-wide, but it would be those districts that are hosting an election for a bond or a levy.
Follow up?
Not a follow-up, but a second question.
You bet.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair, and once again, either one of you, has there been any incidences in Idaho schools that is bringing this to the forefront, or is this just one of those precautionary, it could be an issue in the future, so we just want to find a solution now?
Mr. McGrane?
Madam Chair, Representative Price, thank goodness we have had no school violence on Election Day, and we have had no violence in our polls on Election Day, even beyond schools. But that doesn't mean this concern isn't there. I will say it is the fears are very real. And the messages that we receive from concerned parents and concerned teachers and others are extremely sincerely held beliefs in terms of their concerns. I think it's the same reason we see our schools taking proactive steps to keep our students safe is we don't want to be in the news or have those risks. This bill is trying to address many of those fears of parents. Again, as I mentioned, many of our schools right now have been taking proactive steps towards student safety and locking down the schools. Election Day, it's very difficult, as was referenced by Representative McCann. Historically, we would be in the gym and students would be in the rest of the building. But now with the student safety concerns, that just has gotten to a point where many of our principals don't want to have voting in their schools because they're concerned about their students, which is their role. And so we're trying to balance the two considerations together with this legislation.
Representative Ehart, is your light on? Okay, you are recognized. It's hard to see, but you did this. Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What would we, Director, or anyway, Secretary of State McCrane. I was like, boy, that's a lot to use your proper title. So one of the things you pointed out that I did not realize was on elections, we still actually have a lot of federal law. I mean, I know there's other things going through that would federalize, potentially being discussed at the federal level that would federalize more of the elections. So if I'm hearing you correctly, part of the concern is because of all of these federal regulations, between federal and other people's concern, we are continually narrowing down our options, and schools in the past have been an option, but it seemed to me, so have the schools themselves through the years just slowly opted out? Because it seems like that's where we all used to vote, generally speaking, but yeah, as you point this out, we really I don't think there are as many schools allowing us to vote there. But so more in the context of history, were schools primarily used in the past, and now this is a way to possibly get back to having more voting options?
Mr. McGrane.
Madam Chair, Representative Ehart, I kind of referenced two different parts. I should note it's in the United States Constitution. The elections first and foremost are with Congress, and then it's from there delegated to the state legislatures. So just as starting, yes, there are lots of federal laws as it relates to our elections. And it's true, yes, it used to be historically, I think schools have always been kind of the most common place. Again, they serve as those community centers, right? And the location works out well. But yes, over time, we've seen a dwindling. I can attest that in your district specifically, it's one of those places where we've seen this tension and the limited availability of polling locations because, and I think even local law enforcement, for example, in Bonneville County has expressed concerns about student safety. And so again, this is why we're trying to address, still maintaining the availability for voting, but also address those safety concerns.
Representative Boyle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Secretary of State. My question is about the delay until July of 24. So we are totally going to miss the May primary to have this in effect. Was there a reason that we're going to do that?
Mr. McGrain.
Madam Chair, Representative Boyle, yes. Again, turnout is most significant in the general elections, especially the presidential election. That's where my focus is. But more importantly, for the school administrators, as I'm sure you've heard them attest on many fronts, the contracting that they have to do for school calendars, by doing this date, this gives them a year to work and adjust their school calendars and deal with the contracting issues for implementation into that 2024 or the 24-25 school calendar year. So I believe from the administrative side, they need this additional time in order to make this change.
Seeing no further questions from the committee, we do have public testimony. Thank you,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Most Fabulous Secretary of State, Phil McGrain.
And Madam
I'm just
Chair,
going
if
to
I
keep
may,
adding something every time.
just make it longer. If I may, I appreciate, I know you got the letters from Superintendent Critchfield, and I appreciate her partnership and support in this legislation.
Thank you. Is he here? We have in-person testimony from Jason Richardson. You are welcome to come to the podium. And you know the drill. You're for the information and then your name and who you represent, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jason Richardson, and I'm just here for myself. And I don't know that he mentioned there were some that were just neutral on this. I may be more neutral. I know in the button I put against, but I just had a couple concerns. As I've been a teacher in the public school, I know as we were looking at doing a 4-day work week, one of the most common complaints, I think it was like basically the most outstanding complaint or concern from parents, we're having another day where they need to find and arrange for their children to be somewhere. And I just wonder if on voting day, adding more responsibility to people where they need to find babysitters, they need to go pick up kids from an odd place that they need to arrange, if that would depress our turnout. It's just, I guess, is a concern. I'm not sure what the answer to that is. And then also becoming a lightning rod, having the schools shut down, and then being kind of the easy scapegoat to blame my new babysitting challenges on the schools for shutting down right when we're having an election for different things. It's just a couple of the concerns. When it came to ADA, is there a grandfathering? I spent a lot of time in a particular city council building, and I know we're not compliant. And we do all of, every election is run out of that. So I'm just wondering if there's a grandfathering that would make that a little bit easier on us also. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any further testimony? Seeing none, I will ask Representative Lantine, Secretary of State McGrain, if you would like to close.
Chairman, I'm going to close with a personal experience with this. My middle school, when I was the principal there, was always the polling place for the entire city of Filer. All 4 precincts of Filer voted in our gym, and we didn't have a way to close off students from that area. And I thought about the fact that just somewhere along the line, we cut a hole in the side of the building in order that everyone would come through and the secretary would know they have official business there and needed to be in the building, and she allowed them through, and then they could sign in and all the new things. But twice a year, we just throw it completely wide open because I didn't have a way to close it off. 2 of my main restrooms that had the students need to use were in the gymnasium. right at that end of the gymnasium, so I could not close off the area. My cafeteria was close by, so I always had a lot of students that were right there. I had 2 classrooms right there that the voting definitely disrupted their classroom, and they keep their doors closed, but you still have the noise and the commotion of everybody coming by their window and things to head into things. So I think it's really good that if we're able to close the buildings during election day, not only for school safety, but disruption of the educational process, and they can find other days to have them. And the one question that the gentleman had about the 4-day work weeks, I didn't ever have that, but I didn't know whether or not schools have the ability that would be the day they take off that week and they'd go the other 4 days. I don't know if that's a possibility. I know there's going to be lots more 4-day school weeks. And if Secretary Crane has anything else he'd like to add, I would ask for your do pass recommendation.
Thank you, Representative. We'll let you get back to your seat. Do you have a question for him? No, for Representative Souter.
Hi, for a motion.
Motion is in order.
I make a motion that we pass this resolution and with a do pass to the floor. I'm new to making the motions on this specific one, but I think we all know what I'm talking about.
It was a fabulous motion. You should just feel good about it. Is there any further discussion? Representative Hill.
I have to make a comment, and I'd like to commend this bill. I like to see the proactive nature of this, as security and threats need to be anticipated, and this is a great move instead of reactive. I just had to make that comment because I commend this effort. We should do that more for all our school security and all these issues. It's a great bill. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Coming from a guy who knows strategery. Representative Ehart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm absolutely behind the idea here for a number of reasons. But you know, growing up, the schools, that's where we voted. And my mom, for years and years and years, was one of the voting ladies that was with the group that always manned Hawthorne Elementary School. And I could go on and on. But yes, it's become very difficult to find places to vote. Redistricting, I don't know, 5 years ago, it seems like we just whittled down options, at least in our county, as Mr. McCrane had mentioned. Actually, it whittled down so much that my boss has allowed my place of employment, which is a rather large athletic club, to be used as a voting place. And we actually, it's not just one, we host 2 different precincts because of the lack of places for people to go and vote. And we do, as a private business that makes money, we close down that section, you know, all day long, and people can't use it. But that's how important it is for us to be able to find places to vote. And it does make sense that it'd be at our elementary schools. I think this is a fantastic idea. And for what it's worth, you have my full support. So thank you.
I'm sure they appreciate that. I will take privilege just to address specifically the 2 of the items that weren't addressed to the public testimony. And in my experience, as long as parents had ample knowledge of when something was going to happen, they seemed to be fine with, maybe not nuts about it, but as long as it wasn't, because snow days, you don't get any warning whatsoever. You just wake up and while your kids are hoping that their name is on the list, the parents thinking, now what am I going to do? So this gives them ample warning. And I know that Secretary of State McCrane actually talked to superintendents and got that feedback. Further, that I can just tell you as a matter of fact, in Canyon County, grandfathering was not at all what they were willing to accept. Not even going out to the curbside to allow someone to vote was not deemed adequate ADA compliance. So it is a true concern for Canyon County, Ada County, but you deserve to have some response, I think, to your concerns. So we appreciate that. As for the schools being a lightning rod, take a number, right? It's just, that tends to be the case. All right, is there any further discussion? The motion is to send H111 to the floor with a do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. There's one. Do you want your name recorded? Representative Mendai will be on the record as voting no. Oh, and Price. Sorry, didn't see that. Thank you. All right.